At family dinner, in front of everyone, my husband suddenly looked me straight in the eye and said in the coldest voice, "We need a DNA test." For a moment, I thought I didn't hear him right. My fork slipped out of my hand and hit the plate, and the sound echoed like thunder in the silence that followed. My heart dropped to the floor. Stay with me while I tell you how that one sentence turned my entire world upside down. We were sitting at the long wooden table in his parents' house. His mother had cooked a big Sunday meal, the kind where everyone is supposed to smile and pretend life is perfect. My 12-year-old daughter Lily was right there beside me, happily eating mashed potatoes, her small hands swinging under the table like she always does when she's excited. Mark's father cleared his throat, clearly sensing something, but no one spoke until Mark made that cruel announcement. The room froze. His mother immediately leaned back in her chair, a smirk creeping onto her face like she had been waiting for this moment. His father looked at me like I had been caught stealing. My chest tightened and I could barely breathe. Lily looked up at her dad with wide eyes, not even understanding what was happening. She just knew something was very, very wrong. I tried to speak, to ask him why, but the words wouldn't come out. My mouth was dry, my heart racing. He didn't even flinch. He just repeated, "We need a DNA test," as if he was reading out a grocery list. There was no emotion, no love, just ice. What broke me wasn't just his words, but the way his family reacted. His mother immediately said, "I always knew something wasn't right," and his father nodded in agreement. Not one of them looked shocked. It was like they had been plotting this, waiting for the perfect time to humiliate me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell them how much I had sacrificed for this family, how I had given up my dreams to raise Lily, how I had supported Mark through every hard time. But I couldn't. My daughter was sitting right there, watching, and I couldn't let her see me fall apart completely. So I swallowed my pride, forced my face into stillness, and stayed quiet. But inside, I was breaking. Every bite of food, every laugh that had filled that house before, turned sour in my memory. Mark didn't just question me that night. He questioned Lily's very existence, our entire life together. And as I sat there in silence, with his family glaring at me like I was a criminal, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. I wasn't just being accused. I was being cornered. And this was only the beginning. When people looked at us from the outside, they saw a picture-perfect marriage. We smiled in photographs, held hands at family gatherings, and posted vacation photos that looked like something out of a magazine. Friends would often say, "You two are so lucky, you've built such a beautiful life together." And for a long time, I believed it too. I thought I was living a dream, married to a man who promised me forever. But behind those smiles and carefully chosen moments was a reality no one else could see. Mark's parents never truly accepted me. From the very beginning, I felt their disapproval in the little things. His mother's forced smiles, his father's cold questions about whether I was good enough for their son. Mark would brush it off, saying, "That's just how they are. Don't take it personally." So I learned to swallow my feelings, to laugh politely even when their words cut into me. I told myself it was normal, that every marriage had its challenges. Mark himself was different in private. He wasn't cruel all the time, not in obvious ways, but there was a coldness in him that only I saw when the doors closed. He had a way of making me feel small without ever raising his voice. A sigh when I spoke too long, a sharp look when I disagreed, a comment like, "Why would you think that?" that left me doubting my own mind. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. His silence, his distance, his refusal to see me as an equal said it all. When Lily was born, my whole world shifted. I wanted to be the kind of mother who was always there, who gave her child the love and stability I never had growing up. I had dreams once, a career I worked hard for, ambitions that made me feel alive. But Mark convinced me it was best for me to stay home. "It's what's best for Lily," he said, "and I'll provide for us." At first, it sounded like love. It sounded like security. But slowly, I began to realize it was also control. With no career and no income, I depended on him for everything. He never said it outright, but the message was clear. Without him, I was nothing. The longer I stayed, the more I began to see the cracks in what I thought was love. I replayed memories in my head, little moments I once ignored. How he always introduced me as my wife, but rarely by my name. How he'd correct me in front of friends to make himself look smarter. How he never once asked what I wanted for my own future. One night, while Lily was asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and asked myself a question that scared me. Had Mark ever truly loved me, or had he only loved the way I looked standing next to him? Was I his partner, or just another piece of his perfect picture? The silence in that room gave me the answer I didn't want to hear. That night after the dinner, when everyone had gone to bed, Mark cornered me in the hallway. His face was set, his jaw tight, and I could tell from the way he looked at me that he wasn't going to back down. He didn't waste time with small talk or even a hint of softness. He simply said, "Either you agree to the DNA test, or I'm filing for divorce." His words were sharp, cutting into me like a blade. I stared at him, hoping I had misheard, hoping that maybe some part of him was joking, even though I knew he wasn't. I asked him why he was doing this, why he would humiliate me in front of his parents and our daughter. He shrugged, his eyes cold, and said, "Because I need to know the truth. I can't live in doubt anymore." I reminded him of everything we had shared. 12 years of marriage, the nights we stayed up with Lily when she was sick, the sacrifices I made for our family, the love I thought we had built. My voice cracked as I begged him to think about what he was saying. But he didn't soften. He didn't even blink. Instead, he looked at me like I was a stranger and whispered the cruelest words I had ever heard from him. "If she's mine, we stay. If not, you're gone." The way he said it, flat, cold, almost rehearsed, made me feel like I wasn't even human to him. Like I was just a problem to be solved, not the woman who had given him years of her life. I couldn't believe how disposable he made me feel, how quickly he turned 12 years of marriage into a simple yes or no question. I tried to reach for his hand, desperate to find some sign of the man I once loved, but he pulled back. "Don't," he said sharply. "You've already betrayed me." Those words hit me harder than a slap. Betrayed him? I had never been unfaithful, never even thought about it. My entire world had revolved around him and Lily, and yet he stood there accusing me of the very thing that broke my heart the most. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall in front of him. I asked him if he ever trusted me at all, if he ever really believed in us. His silence was my answer. In that moment, I realized something I had never allowed myself to admit before. To Mark, I wasn't his partner, his equal, or even his friend. I was just convenient. I fit the image he wanted to show the world, and now, because of his doubt or his need for control, he was ready to throw me away without hesitation. I went to bed that night next to a man who no longer saw me as his wife, but as a liability. And I lay there wide awake, staring into the dark, knowing my marriage was hanging by a thread I hadn't even noticed before. The days after Mark's ultimatum were some of the longest of my life. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and my mind wouldn't stop replaying his words. "If she's mine, we stay. If not, you're gone." They echoed in my head until I thought I might lose my mind. Every time I looked at Lily, my heart ached. She was my daughter, my whole world. But Mark's accusation had planted a poisonous seed inside me, one that whispered, "What if?" I knew the truth. I had never cheated. Not once, not even close. But his doubt was so sharp, so insistent, that I found myself questioning my own memories. I started going back to those years in my mind, replaying every detail. The time Lily was conceived, where I was, what our life looked like then. I remembered the apartment we lived in, the stress of Mark working long hours, the way I spent most of my time alone. It was a hard period, but there was never another man. Still, the thought crept in. What if I was forgetting something? What if he was right? It's strange how someone else's distrust can make you doubt yourself. I hated him for making me feel that way. I hated how his cold words made me second-guess the most sacred truth of my life, that Lily was mine, that she was ours. Every time I tried to push the doubts away, they came back stronger. I would lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice over and over. My chest felt tight, my stomach knotted, and no amount of reasoning could silence the fear he had planted. One evening, as I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, I realized I was crying without even knowing when the tears had started. My hands trembled so badly that I had to set the glass down before I broke it. I turned around, and there was Lily, standing in the doorway, her big eyes full of concern. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked softly. Her voice was so innocent, so pure, it nearly broke me in two. I wiped my face quickly, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I whispered, but my voice cracked. She tilted her head, studying me the way children do when they know you're lying. "Did Daddy say something mean?" she asked. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to tell her everything, to pour out the pain in my chest, but how could I? She was only 12. She didn't deserve to carry the weight of her father's doubt. I forced another smile, kissed her forehead, and told her not to worry. But the moment she walked away, I collapsed against the counter, sobbing silently. That night, I realized the true cruelty of Mark's suspicion. It wasn't just about me. It was about the little girl who trusted us both to love her without question. And knowing that she could sense my pain shattered me more than his accusation ever could. I finally gave in. After nights of fighting with myself, of replaying every memory and whispering prayers that the truth would clear me, I agreed to the DNA test. I told myself it would end the nightmare, that once the results came back, Mark would see how wrong he was and maybe, just maybe, we could piece our lives back together. But deep down, a quiet voice warned me that even the truth might not be enough. The day we went to the clinic, I held Lily's hand tighter than ever. She was confused, asking why we were there, why her dad looked so angry and distant. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't break her heart, so I smiled through my tears and said it was just something we had to do. The nurse swabbed her cheek, then mine, then Mark's. It was over in minutes, but the damage it left on my soul was permanent. That night, Mark didn't come to bed. He carried his pillow into the guest room and closed the door without a word. The sound of it clicking shut felt louder than a gunshot. For 12 years, we had shared a bed, shared laughter, shared whispers in the dark. Now there was only silence and cold space between us. The days waiting for the results felt endless. Every morning, his parents called to check in, but it wasn't love or concern in their voices. It was satisfaction, like they already believed I was guilty. His mother even had the audacity to say, "Well, the truth always comes out eventually." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I felt like a stranger in my own home. The walls that once held family pictures and warm memories now felt like a prison closing in on me. Mark barely spoke, and when he did, his words were sharp and clipped, as if he could barely stand to look at me. He treated me like a liar, like someone he had already condemned before the verdict came in. The loneliness was unbearable. I wanted to scream at him, to demand he remember the woman who had stood by his side for 12 years, the mother of his child, the person who gave up her dreams for their family. But instead, I stayed quiet. I watched, and I began to write. Every cruel word, every cold silence, every accusation. I wrote it all down in a notebook I kept hidden in the back of my dresser. It was the only thing that gave me strength, a small sense of control in a world where I suddenly had none. I didn't know then what I would use it for, but I knew this. If Mark wanted to treat me like a criminal, then I would collect every piece of evidence of his cruelty. The test was meant to prove my innocence, but as I waited, I realized something bigger. It was also exposing the truth about him, and I wasn't sure I would ever be able to forgive it. The envelope arrived on a gray afternoon, the kind where the sky felt heavy and the air carried a chill. My hands trembled as I tore it open, my heart pounding so loudly I thought Lily might hear it from the other. For days, I had lived with a knot in my chest, but when my eyes landed on the words in black and white, that knot loosened. The DNA test was clear. Lily was Mark's daughter. I let out a shaky laugh, tears spilling down my cheeks. Relief washed over me, the kind that makes your knees weak. Finally, I thought, the nightmare was over. I clutched the paper in my hands like a lifeline and went to find Mark. He was sitting in the living room, scrolling on his phone like nothing in the world was wrong. "Mark," I said softly, holding out the results. "She's yours. Just like I always told you." My voice cracked, but my heart was ready for his arms to wrap around me, for his eyes to soften, for him to whisper that he was sorry for doubting me. But that moment never came. He glanced at the paper, read it, and then tossed it on the coffee table like it was a grocery receipt. "Guess I was wrong," he said flatly. No warmth, no apology, just those cold words followed by a shrug. And then, as if it was nothing, he added, "Still, maybe this marriage isn't working." I stood frozen, staring at him, waiting for him to take it back. He didn't. The relief that had flooded me just seconds earlier twisted into something darker, confusion, hurt, and a deep anger that burned in my chest. "That's it," I whispered. "After humiliating me, after putting our daughter through this, all you can say is, maybe this marriage isn't working." Before he could answer, his parents walked in. They had been waiting for the results, their faces tight with expectation. I handed them the paper, thinking maybe at least they'd admit they were wrong. But his mother skimmed it and said, "Well, she must have done something to make you suspicious. A faithful wife wouldn't give her husband doubts." His father nodded in agreement, adding, "You can't blame Mark for wanting to be sure." Their words knocked the breath out of me. It didn't matter that the truth was right in front of them. In their eyes, I was guilty no matter what. And in that moment, it hit me like a slap across the face. This was never really about Lily. It was never about the test. It was about control, about making me feel small, disposable, and powerless. Mark hadn't wanted the truth. He wanted proof that he could break me, that he could accuse me, humiliate me, and still walk away untouched. I realized then that no piece of paper could fix what was broken, because what was broken wasn't trust. It was him. I remember that night clearly. I sat on the edge of my bed, Lily asleep in the next room, and I finally let myself cry. Not the quiet, polite tears I had shed before, trying to hide them from Mark or his parents, but full, ragged sobs that shook my entire body. For years, I had held everything in, my fears, my pain, my anger, and it all came pouring out at once. I felt broken, small, and completely alone. But as the tears fell, something else began to stir inside me. Clarity. After I had cried until I could barely breathe, I called my best friend Rachel. Her voice was warm, familiar, a lifeline I hadn't realized I needed so badly. I told her everything, the DNA test, Mark's accusations, the way his parents had sided against me, the coldness in his eyes. And she said something that hit me like a bolt of lightning. "Emily, you deserve better. You deserve respect, love, and someone who sees your worth. You've given everything to this family, and you've been treated like dirt." Her words sank deep into me. For the first time in months, I could see clearly. This wasn't just about a test or a fight. It was about my life, my daughter, and the person I refused to let myself become. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for Mark to change, or hoping he'd suddenly see reason. I had to act. The next day, I quietly contacted a lawyer. I didn't tell Mark, didn't hint at what I was doing. I just sat down, went over my options, and learned about my rights. Custody, assets, property. Everything I had given up thinking it was safe now had a way to be reclaimed. I felt a strange mixture of fear and empowerment, like I was standing on the edge of something terrifying, but for the first time, I was holding the rope myself. I began documenting everything: Mark's coldness, his insults, the ways he had tried to control me and Lily. I recorded financial statements, emails, even small incidents I had previously dismissed. Every little piece could be used to protect myself, and every note I wrote fueled a quiet fire inside me. This wasn't just about survival, it was about justice. Inside, I made a vow. If Mark wanted war, he would get one. But it wouldn't be blind, emotional, or desperate. It would be calculated, measured, and fair. I would fight for Lily, for my dignity, and for the life I had been denied. No more tears hidden behind forced smiles, no more silences that made me feel small. I was done waiting, done hoping, and finally, ready to take control. For the first time in a long time, I felt strength I didn't know I had. The breaking point had come, but with it came a vision of what I could be. A mother protecting her child, a woman reclaiming her life, and someone who would never let anyone, not even Mark, make her feel worthless again. After I had made the decision to stop being a victim, I knew I needed to be smart. Anger alone wouldn't save me or Lily, and I wasn't about to hand Mark any excuse to twist the story in his favor. I started observing him closely, noting every instance of coldness, every slight, every way he tried to manipulate the house into feeling like a prison. But it wasn't just about words or attitude anymore. I needed proof, concrete evidence that could stand in court and show exactly who he really was. I began going through the bills and financial statements, quietly and without him knowing. At first, it was tedious, just numbers and deposits and withdrawals. But soon I started noticing patterns. There were transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, small at first, then larger ones. It was clear. Mark had been secretly moving money, hiding assets, and probably planning to take advantage of our situation if things fell apart. My stomach turned, but I kept my cool. I knew I couldn't act on it yet. Patience would be my weapon. While I was collecting all this evidence, I kept up the appearance of compliance. I laughed at his jokes, agreed to his little rules, and acted like I was still the submissive, frightened wife he wanted me to be. Behind that mask, though, I was quietly building a map of his behavior, connecting the dots and noting every lie and betrayal. Every cold word, every dismissive glance, every hidden transfer went into my private notebook. The more I gathered, the more I realized just how much control he thought he had, and how vulnerable he was without realizing it. He believed I was defeated, that I would crumble under the weight of his accusations and distance. But in reality, every move he made was being recorded in my mind and on paper, creating a record that could not be denied. I also paid attention to the small details he overlooked. Overheard conversations with colleagues, moments when he thought no one was watching, even the subtle ways he tried to make me doubt myself. All of it added to the story of who he really was, and I knew it would be devastating when the time came to reveal it. At home, I smiled through dinners, kept the house in order, and even pretended to seek his approval in small things. He didn't notice my quiet resistance. He thought he had me under control. Meanwhile, I was setting the stage piece by piece, ensuring that when the moment came to expose him, it would be undeniable. And every night, as I went to bed with Lily safely asleep, I felt a growing confidence. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a plan, evidence, and the patience to execute it. Mark may have believed he was the one in control, but the truth was, I was already winning. Every secret he tried to keep, every attempt to manipulate me, every cold glance he threw my way, it was all part of the story I was going to tell. And when that moment came, there would be no escaping the consequences of his choices. The next family gathering arrived, and I walked in quietly, keeping my composure while Mark smirked across the room. He was already boasting to his parents about how much I owed him gratitude for keeping the household running, for raising Lily, for being patient with his coldness. His tone was smug, confident, like he had already won. I smiled politely, listening to him praise himself while the room nodded along. But inside, I was ready. Every detail, every note, every piece of evidence I had gathered over the past weeks was prepared, and tonight would be the night I finally turned the tables. After dinner, as he continued his self-congratulatory monologue, I stood up calmly, holding a folder I had brought with me. The room went quiet, and all eyes turned to me. Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly confused by the sudden shift in energy, and his parents leaned in, curious and cautious. "I think it's time everyone sees the truth," I said, my voice steady, even as my heart raced. I opened the folder and began laying out the bank records, the hidden transfers, and the documents from my lawyer explaining my rights and intentions. I walked them through each account Mark had tried to hide, each transaction that proved he had been secretly moving money. Mark's face went from smug to shocked in seconds. His parents' smiles faded, replaced by pale, stunned expressions. The carefully crafted image of Mark, the perfect husband, the loyal father, the model son, crumbled right before their eyes. The same people who had accused me, judged me, and sided with him now stared in disbelief at the proof I had calmly presented. "I've gathered everything I need to protect myself and Lily," I said, my gaze steady on Mark. "I will be filing for divorce. The assets will be divided according to the law, and Lily will remain in my care. I won't allow her to be dragged through lies or suspicion any longer." The room was silent, except for Lily's small gasp as she looked between us. She understood in a way that words couldn't capture. Her mother was standing up, not just for herself, but for her. I reached down and took Lily's hand, letting her squeeze mine, feeling a surge of strength from her presence. Mark opened his mouth, probably to protest, to defend himself, but the weight of the evidence and the clarity of my words left him speechless. His parents exchanged nervous glances, finally realizing that their son, the man they had trusted and admired, was not untouchable. I took a deep breath and added, "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, justice, and making sure Lily grows up in a safe, honest environment. She stays with me." The room remained still, every eye on Mark now, his pride shattered, his control gone. And as I looked at Lily, her small hand in mine, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. Finally, the public reckoning had arrived, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of relief and triumph. Sitting across from Mark in the lawyer's office, I watched him fumble through the papers, his face pale, his usual confidence gone. Every demand, every accusation, every attempt to control me had been carefully documented and countered. The judge had approved the custody agreement, the asset division, and the house. Everything I had quietly prepared for months. Lily would stay with me, safe, loved, and secure. Mark was left with nothing but his shattered pride and a reputation in tatters. Walking out of the courthouse, the sunlight felt brighter, warmer, like it was welcoming me into a new life. I held Lily's hand tightly, feeling her small fingers grip mine with trust and love. She looked up at me and smiled, the pure, unguarded smile that reminded me why I had fought so hard. For her, for myself, for the life we deserved. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. I returned to my career, something I had given up years ago for a husband who never truly appreciated me. It felt strange at first, walking into the office again, hearing the familiar hum of computers and chatter of coworkers. But I quickly realized I had missed this part of myself, the ambition, the challenges, the satisfaction of building something for me, and not just for someone else. At home, I worked to create a warm, stable environment for Lily. Her laughter filled the rooms, no longer shadowed by tension or fear. I painted her bedroom her favorite color, baked cookies together, and listened to her stories about school with genuine attention, not the distracted half-listening I had done when Mark's coldness loomed over us. Every evening, we sat together for dinner, a simple routine that had been stolen from us for so long, and it felt like reclaiming a small piece of happiness. I also reconnected with Rachel, my best friend, whose support had been unwavering throughout the entire ordeal. One evening, we sat at the kitchen table, Lily drawing beside us, and we laughed. Truly laughed, freely and without pretense, for the first time in years. The weight I had carried, the fear, the betrayal, the humiliation, felt lighter with each chuckle, each shared memory, each moment of normalcy. Sitting back in my chair, watching Lily's small face light up as she recounted a story about her day, I realized I no longer thought about Mark's betrayal in the way I once did. The anger had transformed into clarity, the pain into strength. I wasn't defined by what he had done, or by the humiliation he had tried to inflict. I was defined by my resilience, my love for my daughter, and the courage it had taken to reclaim our lives. For the first time in over a decade, I felt free. Not just free from Mark, but free to be myself again. The betrayal no longer haunted me. It was a memory, a chapter that had ended. And in its place was something far stronger: freedom, independence, and the quiet, unshakable joy of building a life on my own terms, with Lily by my side. For the first time in years, I felt truly, undeniably unstoppable. Do you think Emily made the right choice by standing up to Mark and taking control of her life? Or should she have tried to fix the marriage? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video.